Hey, families, your sister Jocelyn here, and welcome to another episode of Faith on the Journey. If this is your first time tuning in, we welcome you. We are so glad that you are here and want you to know that we're a company committed to helping you strengthen your faith, heal your heart, and discover a sense of community. And we do so through a variety of ways by connecting you with a team of Christian counselors and offering support groups throughout the year. You can learn about these resources and so much more by visiting our website at faithonthejourney.org. Again, that is faithonthejourney.org. Now, today I have the opportunity to welcome to the show someone who's not a stranger to you. She was actually a guest on a show earlier this year talking about the pain of healing through divorce. But now she's here to share her own testimony, and it's an incredible one. I'm bringing to the show Dea, who is a multi talented, award winning entrepreneur, philanthropist who believes in the power of connecting with others. As a women's empowerment coach, and through her personal journey and many struggles from being a divorced mom of 5 and all the other challenges she's gone through, now she uses her pain as the power for her purpose. And she's going to share her testimony with you today. We're very excited to welcome you back to the show, Dea. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me back. This is such a treat.
Yes, yes. Well, I was blessed by you the other week. You were coaching me and encouraging me in parts of my journey. And as I was getting to learn more about you, I was like, wow, Dad, you have a testimony that needs to be shared on my show. And so I'm grateful that you accepted my invitation and would love for you to just start by telling us a little bit about your childhood growing up.
Okay. So first and foremost, I grew up in Brazil. At the age of 5 months, I was adopted from an orphanage, along with my twin sister, thankfully. Many people don't have that privilege to be adopted together, but we were adopted together. I was raised by, my mom was a pediatric orthodontist as well as did pediatric dentistry. My father was a civil engineer. I have an older sister that was also adopted from another family. And I had a pretty happy life. My childhood was filled with wonder, curiosity, many trips. My mom was loved to travel, so we had a great life. I had a great life growing up. Adoption back when was, and I'm going to tell you my age. I'm 57 years old. So 57 years ago, adoption wasn't something that we spoke about openly. So consequently, there was a way that my mom felt she needed to protect us. So I was actually raised with a legitimate birth certificate. There is no recollection, no documentation that I was ever adopted. But factually, I did live in an orphanage for 5 months. My sister and I were actually both gravely ill. We were taken from the orphanage, placed in a hospital. Back then, they did not have a neonatal unit. We were malnourished. We were fed untreated rice water, which was the water they cleaned the rice with. The orphanage was for older children. They used to make these big batches of rice and beans. So that water that cleaned the beans and the rice before it was cooked was poured into bottles. And we had a bottle in the morning, a bottle at night, 2 diaper changes a day. So needless to say, we were covered in rashes, parasites. We had parasites. So I lived in the hospital for a month before I went home. And because of it, my first photograph was at the age of 6 months.
Wow, that is quite the story, Dea. And hearing about your family and how amazing they are, the fact that they adopted you and your twin sister and adopted another sibling, they believed in the beauty of adoption. And that's really our focus for today's show is releasing the shame around adoption because I know that many people out there who might actually be listening might know someone who's adopted or was adopted as well, and there's stigmas associated with it. There might be some other emotional struggles that they have with it around abandonment. And so I'm curious as to your experience. First of all, when did you realize that you were adopted? How did your parents explain that to you? And how did you process that information?
The first time that I understood what adoption was, it was at the age of 4. And I thought my mom had such a brilliant way of explaining. First of all, just a little back history. The reason why my mom adopted me and my sisters is because she had a hysterectomy at the age of 27. So again, pain bringing light, right? Pain reframing our world. And much what happened to me, my own adoption, with my own adoption experience, is that what was meant to divide, separate, destroy, abandon, neglect created so much love and so much connection. And this is why I'm so passionate about being here today, because I want someone to know that, you know, you can come from brokenness, you can come from loneliness, you can come from abandonment and neglect and still come out on the other side feeling loved. Now, my story was shared with me. I believe at the age of 4, I was already super curious. So I asked my mom, where did I come from? And she gave us, there was this little book that was, where do babies come from? So it was like a story, an explanation in children's way, words, much for a child to understand. And so she goes through the book and explains how babies are born, how do they come into the world, and how that little flower seed is planted into the mom's belly, and a little flower grows, and the baby then is born. And so I said to her, where do they come from? How do they come to the world? And she says, well, most babies come from the mom's belly, but you didn't come to me that way. I went somewhere and I took you. I chose you to be my daughter. Those words stayed with me to this day. I was chosen. She chose to be my mom. She chose me to be her daughter. So I grew up with the concept that I was special no matter what.
That's beautiful. And I love how your mother shared that with you. It was wrapped in love. It showed you that you were handpicked. And and I think that's the beautiful framing of adoption, that someone did choose you. And yet there's a counter message out there. It's a counter message that might be from the enemy, Satan, around this, in terms of the fact that someone didn't want you, someone abandoned you, you might not have been good enough. And I really want to speak to that narrative, Dea, because I know, again, there's people who are struggling with that. What's your response to that narrative around adoption?
I believe that adoption is first of all, the gift that keeps on giving, but it also works both ways. You as a child of someone who adopts you, you are much as a gift to them as they are to you. In my case, in my twin sister's case, we were literally very gravely ill. If my mom hadn't come on that particular day, we would have died. And actually, the orphanage director was a dear friend of my mom's, and she says, "You need to come today. They're not going to make it." So I was always reframing my life in a sense that would have happened to me had I not been adopted? Where would I be today? Would I be the person that I am today? My story of adoption, my journey as an adoptee, led me in so many different directions, even in my own life today with my own children. Now I'm a mom of 5, and all of my children are naturally born. They are my own biological children. I never adopted. But my story of adoption impacted one of my pregnancies. So I think that for anyone who is adopted and is feeling that they're putting the focus and the emphasis on the fact that someone might not have wanted them, I always thought to myself, maybe if I had not been adopted and had survived, I would have not had the life that I have today. For whatever reason, I feel that nothing was out of place in a sense, even though so much chaos was around my life in the first 5 months of life, especially as I became a mom and watched my babies up until the age of 5 months. I realized how much was needed to nurture a baby up until that age and beyond that, and that I didn't have that. My whole life came with that time not being held by anyone. Like I mentioned, we had 2 diaper changes a day. We were fed twice a day with untreated water, unhealthy water. And I'm here today talking to you. How does that happen?
By the grace of God. That's how. Such a beautiful story. And I love how you have reframed this story. And I think there's a lesson in that for any struggle that someone might be going through in life, in terms of the lens, the frame in which you view certain experiences, and choosing to see it that way, and the beauty of it. And this is something where I know we're kind of jumping forward, but again, nothing is wasted in terms of how you view life, and now how you're encouraging other people as a women's empowerment coach. And when I was having a conversation with you last week, one of our conversations was really tracing the core back to experiences that we might have had in childhood and how it impacts how we view life today. And for someone who might had struggles with feeling abandoned, feeling rejected by their biological parents if they were adopted, that cord can trace into decisions and experiences as an adult as it relates to how we view experiences. And so I would like for you to spend a little time talking about the importance of tracing the cord back
Mhm.
and rewriting that narrative where you might have had a negative frame on how you looked at things and how we might need to shift that.
Absolutely. First and foremost, I think that we need to go back to the understanding that our adoption, our it was someone chose us over some other event in their lives. Somebody made us a priority as opposed to somebody left us, somebody neglect us. The stories that I've heard around my adoption are not something that I've ever shared with anyone. And there is a little bit of shame about it, believe it or not. We all will have some element of that, but I don't consider that being something that should become us. We should not walk in shame. Shame should not become us because we were adopted. On the contrary, I think that adoption speaks much about um, a new chapter, a new opportunity, possibilities, being chosen. If we really look carefully of what adoption is, someone chooses to take you in and bring you to a life that perhaps you wouldn't have had it otherwise. And I think that's a gift in itself. And beyond that, the gift that you are to that person. My mother wanted to be a mother, but she couldn't biologically. She had a hysterectomy at the age of 27, and it was devastating. She had 2 miscarriages prior to that. She was trying to have a family, and my dad also wanted to be a father. Along comes us, these broken little girls that were sick and almost dying. And, we had a beautiful life. We had a family. We became a family. So the reframing is much about a sense of perhaps going back to the core values, the things that were instilled in you. What did your parents, your adopted parents, gave you? What did you bring from them into the present now that you can sort of look at and understand that perhaps it was meant to be? I mean, we know there are no accidents, right? So I think adoption is the gift. Adoption is the blessing. That's where the blessing lies. If we look carefully and go back and reframe it and put all of the pieces of this puzzle together of why it happened this way, and go back and see what you have learned from your biological parents that now play a role in your life. I can't tell you how many times I think, the abandonment, beginning with my biological mother, or I could say our, because me and my sister and I, there was so much lack in that abandonment. But yet, there is a notion for me now as an adult looking back, this woman could not give me the things that God had meant for me as a woman today. I would have never been the person that I am today had I not been adopted by the woman that adopted us. That woman's unconditional love. I mean, we weren't the pretty babies that were adopted by a surrogate that was all pretty in the hospital. We're literally covered in scabs and bugs, and we were so gravely ill that we might have not made it. We lived they created a little unit in the emergency room. One of my mom's colleagues was married to a hospital administrator, and they created a little corner on the emergency room. 2 incubators were so little, and they had us first separate because we're so sick, and then together. That's how tiny we were. Um, and I mean, as a baby, I had insomnia. Can you imagine? Babies don't have problems sleeping, but I had trouble sleeping. They wake up a lot, but I don't have trouble sleeping. I had so many issues, and we had problems with our enamel and our teeth. We had all kinds of physical issues growing up because of that malnourishment time, and all because a person couldn't take care of us. But yet, look, fast forward to now. We get to live a life and tell the story and inspire others. So that is the gift. And I understood that, luckily, because the way it was told to me, it wasn't, my mom never said your mom didn't want you, or your mom just left you there. She said, I wanted to be your mom. I chose you. I know a lot of people don't have that beginning, that point of reference or that point of origin. People are coming from different experiences. But at the end of the day, The adoption is the gift, and it goes both ways.
It really does, Dea. And I appreciate you pointing that out that not everybody has that story of origin. And it's difficult when someone doesn't have or did not have a parent who so graciously shared the adoption story with them. They might have said something that was somewhat painful, like your parents didn't want you, so I had to take you in, or
Mm-hmm.
something to that effect. And those words can ring in a child's ears and all the way up into adulthood, and it could be very difficult to shift the narrative. So, if someone had that experience, what have you learned about renewing the mind and releasing certain thoughts that no longer serve you? What process, what steps can someone take to help them to release that?
For me, and I had, just before I say that, I wanted to go back a little bit and say that even though I had that beginning, along the way, because of the culture that I was in, we were constantly reminded that we were less than. We were just the little girls that had been adopted. Or for the people who knew the story, because my mom tried to hide it as much as possible to protect us, the culture itself was unforgiving. And many times I had to deal with things like, for example, when I was about 12, I was at school and this girl says to me, "I know something about you that you may not know about yourself." And I said, "What could that be?" I said, "Is it that my mom chose me and yours had no choice?" So I started becoming very aware that we're always going to be put in a frame that we were less than. And I still had enough strength to override that, to overcome that. And I think, again, that very important day, "I chose you to be my daughter," those words resonated with me. Now, for those who don't have that, right, what's important is to look at the journey, go back and look along the way of what it is that you do have as opposed to what you don't have. Were you really neglected, or were you chosen? And in what ways in your life you can maybe write down some of your thoughts on this. What areas of your life, going back, can you trace back to the moments that you felt that had you not been adopted, you wouldn't have had or be the person that you are today? I think it's really important to have another look. Okay. And when you go back, don't go back to blame the parent that abandoned you, or to find the lack in the parent that couldn't give you certain things because they weren't your biological parents. They did the best with what they had. However, it's important to take a look. Take a look at what happened. Backtrace your steps. Now, not everyone gets to meet their biological parents. I didn't meet mine. Some people get to meet the biological parents and then have another opportunity to reframe. Some people have the opportunity and choose not to because they're afraid it might hurt the parent that's that's adopted. So look at those areas. Everyone's setup is, I believe, different. Everyone has a different set of circumstances, but mainly take a look. Be courageous enough and brave enough and go back and take a look at your trajectory. What exactly happened? Do you even know? Because sometimes, what happens is people know they're adopted, but they don't know anything about what happened. And that's sometimes a part of the issue. A part of the issue is not knowing what happened. And once you know what happened, it's much like going to the doctor, right? So you say, "I go to the doctor, I had back pain," and you didn't know what was going on. So it's just, you just, I need to know what's going on. So you go to the doctor and the doctor says, "Well, it's not your spine, it's from your kidneys." So now you go to the kidney doctor and you find answers, specific answers to that issue. It's no different with life. Go back to your story and go find out why you were adopted. If there was any way, if your biological parents are still alive. Some people choose not to go back to the biological parents, and that's okay. There is no right or wrong way, but we should not be led by shame. We should be led by curiosity. We should be led by, wanting to know what happened. Why? Because it matters. It's a part of the puzzle. And I'm not saying go back. It's not going to fix or change anything in the moment. It's just for the sake of knowing. A lot of times when we know something, we feel better. We do better. You understand it. You know why. You know the truth. I think that helps people get through this aspect of adoption that thinks, "Well, nobody wanted me."
Mm. Yeah, Dea, that and I can only imagine that there's a level of curiosity, so many questions that people might struggle with. And as you mentioned, sometimes you might be afraid to open that Pandora's box to begin that search. And
Mhm.
sometimes, Dea, it's unfortunate where they might not be able to, as you mentioned, talk to their biological parents, or their adoptive parent might say, I don't want to talk about it. And in cases like that, when you aren't able to necessarily get the answers as to why, then what should a person direct their attention towards doing?
I would say, first of all, 9 times out of 10, when we can't find the answers we want is because we're not able to figure out how to have the conversation started. I think there always can be at least a conversation about it. So the way to approach it is you approach your adopted parents and you adoptive parents and you say your concerns or your curiosity, or you ask them how would they feel if you wanted to find out more. There is always a way to start a conversation, whether you do it just you and your parents, or if you say, I need to get some help, some counseling. Would you guys be willing to come to the session with me? Maybe have a mediator or another family member help. I think the main thing is most people don't want to start the conversation because it is uncomfortable. So that starts there, right? Have some conversation around what is available to you in terms of information. Are your parents there? Are your adoptive parents even comfortable talking about it? I think that probably most are. And if they aren't, is because they want to protect you in some way. So to remember that everybody's coming from a place of love in a way. You know, your parents may come across as not wanting to share some of the things, but remember they're trying to protect you. They come from a place of love. And you, on the other hand, also come from a place of love because you have the right to have an understanding about who you are and where you come from. So I think keeping those things in mind, make it a priority to have that conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's great. And with the conversation, understanding that you might not have all the answers. And I think, Dale, when it comes to that, is there some things that they can do to experience peace in the unknowing?
Okay. Some, you're correct, some will find no answers. Some won't be able to trace it back to their biological parents, or some will find biological parents and find out they have siblings, other step or half siblings. So some will find great joy in a new whole life with a new kind of extended family. And some will not find answers. I don't have a lot of answers about my biological mom. I don't even know if my biological mom was married. But I tell you this, when I was 52 years old, I was in a place, and this was a kind of a strange experience for me. I was in a place at a store, and a woman walked up to me and said, I have to tell you something. Your mom want you to know that she is happy that you have acknowledged her. And I thought it was so confusing because my mom, my adoptive mom had passed away many years ago, 30 something years ago. So I thought she was talking about my mom, who is my adopted mom, which is my real mom to me, because I never met my biological mom. And then I came home and I thought, what a strange experience. I was started thinking, and I realized that 2 days before, just 2 short days before that happened, I had a thought about my biological mother. And I said a prayer, not necessarily directed to her, but about the fact that I was grateful that not only I was alive, but that I was here and that I was thriving and that I knew my life had meaning or I wouldn't have made it, especially under the conditions in which I lived for the first 5 months. It's a miracle that my sister and I are still, we grew up together. We still have a relationship. She lives in Brazil. But I said, look at how much, again, all that was meant to destroy, divide, abandon, neglect brought so much connection and love. So I said a prayer about that I felt grateful for my life. And I said, thank you for giving me life. Said it very, not like specifically, mom, I didn't use those words, but I said to the person that brought me into this world, the person who from I'm, my biological mom, thank you for my life. That changed everything for me. It was the only time and the first time and the only time that I've ever acknowledged my biological mother up until that day. I was 52 years old. And that gave me I connected all the dots to the beginning. So for those people who don't have answers, at the very least, make time to acknowledge that, be thankful for your life. There was someone who sacrificed in some way or someone who died maybe in childbirth, or someone who couldn't keep you because of an abusive situation, or maybe it was whatever the situation may be, you are still worthy. You are still here. You're still valuable. And you are a part of this life right now. We only have right now. We can go back and connect the dots. We can take another look of why we're here. If we find answers, great. Some people, like I said, will have many blessings. Some people won't find. I didn't find out anything about my biological mom, but I did have a life that was in an orphanage for 5 months. And then I had a whole new life, and I'm a mom of five today and a grandmother. So much love, so much connection has come out of the situation. And if I may share, actually, I have a little story about being adopted. One year I was invited to my church to speak on World Day, and they wanted me to share a little bit about my childhood and my upbringing in Brazil and the different culture. And I happened to mention my adoption because it was so important for them to know that, how much I appreciated being a mom and being alive. At that time, I was pregnant with my fourth baby. And my daughter, it was my youngest daughter, Juliana, who's now 16 years old. And during that time, I was pregnant. In the very beginning of that pregnancy, we had a situation where it was quote unquote supposed to be abnormal. I had two miscarriages after that pregnancy. I already had three children. And because of those miscarriages, they said to me, we're going to do an early ultrasound, and we couldn't find the baby. And they said, you might be having another miscarriage. So let's wait a week and see how everything is. We'll take your blood. The hormones were doubling normally. So they said, come back in a week. And when I went back that week, everything was fine. She was there. The heart was beating. It was an incredible moment. Fast forward to the time I was already in my actually, it was in my early 40s. So they wanted to do an amniocentesis. And for those of you who might not know, that is when they take sampling of the amniotic fluid. They go in with a big needle in your stomach and they pull the fluid out and they do an analysis of the pregnancy. That analysis pertained to both placenta health, and also the baby's health. And I had an abnormal result. And it said that the baby was missing 29%, 17% of the chromosomes were missing. 29 of strands of the X chromosome was not present. And so it became a whole story. In a nutshell, what happened was, in the end, during that world event at the church, I didn't know any of this. All that I knew was that my daughter was in my belly. My pregnancy was going at the time the right way. I hadn't gotten to the amniocentesis part yet when I gave that speech about my life and where I grew up, etc. And a lady got up at the end, and I was telling them about my adoption and how my sister and I were very gravely ill. We're literally so ill that we almost didn't make it. And the lady got up and she said, I'm just wondering, you told us about your mother and how she was so accomplished, and why do you think that a woman of her stature would have wanted to adopt? And she paused, and then she said, these two little nothings. My jaw just dropped. I didn't know what to say. And I took a breath and I said, well, I guess because she was the type of person that would always change someone's life. Everything she did was about love, and she changed our lives. Her unconditional love literally saved us from dying. So I guess that's the reason. I don't know. But then fast forward to a few weeks later, and I was upset about that comment, actually, that question. I didn't understand why that question was there. But then fast forward to, I would say, about 4 weeks later is when I received the results of the the amniocentesis. And I went back to that question. What's the reason why my mom, such an accomplished woman, would want to adopt these two little nothings? And I said, here's the reason. The reason is that part of the condition that my daughter would have had, that if she had the strand of Turner syndrome, she would have been able to conceive, right? So my mother couldn't conceive, and this is why she adopted us. So I saw that as a sign of God saying, this is your way to pay it forward. Your daughter's life, you may not know the outcome of her life. You may not know what's going to happen. She may have Turner syndrome and never be able to conceive. But again, she might be a person who will do what your mom did and adopt someone and save their life, just like your mom saved your sister's life and yours. And it became so clear to me that that question had been a catalyst to the answer to that decision that I have to make, to understand that I was there not to say, dictate the outcome of my daughter's life, but to be there to receive her. And that was a moment of, this is what I said, so many things from adoption can look like it's broken, can look like it was horrible and you were not wanted. Fast forward to your life, you don't know how down the road it will impact you. I had my baby, she was healthy. Thank God everything was okay. But the story was told at a CBS Studios in an interview. It became a part of a book called Miracles and Moments of Grace: Inspiring Stories for Moms by Nancy B. Kennedy. It's in a magazine online. So many things came out of it. And I know that people who read it understood that we don't get to decide the ripple effect of love, because adoption is love. And if you're feeling like you're not loved, you're neglected, think this way. Think of the people that were there for you, not those that couldn't be. Because maybe those who couldn't be wouldn't have been able to give you the life that you deserved, that God knew more than you, that God saw everything down the road. He saw what happened before, but he also saw ahead of you. And us as people, we can't see the future, right? We can only connect the dots going backwards. So do that job. Go backwards, take another look. Take another look, but this time, take another look knowing that nothing was out of place, that God had his timing, God had a purpose for you, God has a reason for you to be here. I have a reason to be here. I was supposed to die and I didn't, and I'm here talking to you. So to be open to receive this blessing, the adoption is the gift. The adoption is not the neglect. It's not the story of abandonment. The adoption is the story of acceptance.
Amen. Thank you for that, Dea. And your testimony is extremely powerful. And now to look at how God is using you to help women across the world, I just give God glory for it. And I would love for you to spend a little bit of time talking about your current work, what you help women to do. Just talk about how God is using you now.
Connection,
Hmm.
connection. I go back to the origin of how it was not meant to be. I was meant, I was dying in a crib by myself without touch, without love. And then God said, no, there was more, and brought me to a life with a woman. My parents were extraordinary. My mother in particular was an extraordinary woman who lived her life giving, teaching us what love was, showing us what love was. And I don't see this as an accident at all. I see that this is what was meant to be. So I became very interested in people and talking to people and helping people, even through my pain and my struggles. I can't say that, for those of us who even find ourselves in gratitude and can connect the dots and see how God meant things for us, it still doesn't mean your life won't have struggles. I have a lot of struggles in my life, and I learned how to, turn them into purpose. So today I am a women's empowerment coach. I also am a marriage and family coach. I talk about relationships with people. I think I talk about connection. There's a part of me that is very big on understanding, being the voice for those who can't understand how to say something or how to ask questions, reframing some of the life struggles so that people can see it from a different set of eyes, one that allows for possibility, one that allows for reinvention, creativity, love. I believe that when we were given, I always say we're given memory, we're given free will, right? Memories can bring us to great memories if we have them, but if we don't have them, we'll have bad memories, and those create resentment, right? But we have free will. That free will gives us the opportunity to choose to have hope, choose to be grateful, because then we're connected with peace, power, and purpose. So that's what I love to do. I love to talk to people and help them reframe their world, their minute. I love looking back, not to blame, not to change, not to fix, but to say that's what happened. This is what happened. And that can actually free you, because you could say, oh, I see why this is, because this happened. And so now I'm doing this, but I can change that. I can be open to this now that I have an understanding. I am a need to know kind of person. I can't tell you how many times I struggled because I just didn't know what it was. But once I know what it is, It's good. Even in this experience with my daughter's pregnancy, the struggle was nobody could give me an answer. They said we have to wait to see if she's going to, when she's born, and even she might not make it until 28 weeks of gestation. Not knowing what to do, what it was, drove me up the wall. But once I understood and knew what I had in the what I need, what I could expect of it, it brought some peace. It brought a little bit of, okay, I can deal with this. At least I know something, something.
That's great, Dea. And I'm curious as to some maybe 1 or 2 practices that people can incorporate in their journey of healing around reframing. You spoke a lot about looking back, not getting stuck in your past, but understanding your past, asking questions, being curious. Are there any other steps that one might take to help them to heal, especially if they find themselves kind of stuck
Mhm.
based on what happened in their past?
I think it's important to, if you can, find someone to talk to. Find someone to talk to, or find a support group. There are many people, we're definitely not alone in our struggles. There are many videos available, many resources available online. um, I think getting help is important, not so much for the sake of talking about the problems, but finding someone like a coach that can actually guide you, give you strategies, exercises, things to think about. A lot of times when we don't know what happened, we have a tendency to make up our own stories in our heads, and we sometimes are not great authors of what happened, because we have feelings, right, such as abandonment and sadness or sorrow, or feeling like we don't belong, that we're different. But there are many people that are just like you. So try to get help with a coach, someone that can actually walk you through the steps of understanding what happened, and then give you tools to access. Okay. And I like to say access, tools to access, because a coach or a therapist or a psychiatrist or a counselor, they can't give you the answers. They can't give you the solutions. They can give you the path in which you can access those tools, because also you have to want to find that path as for yourself. But find someone that can actually guide you, give you some direction, give you some ideas, someone who knows how to ask the right questions that can help you reframe some of the things that happened in the past. And last but not least, see if you can find a tribe of women that are, kind of in the same journey as you, looking for answers, not necessarily just about your situation, which is your adoption, uh, the perception of your adoption, but there are many women that are going to different struggles. And it's amazing to sit in a room full of people that are dealing with different things. It helps you understand how complex, but how simple life is. It's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. So it becomes complex. Understanding that, seeing other people going through some of, even if they're different struggles, kind of helps you feel like you're human. You're human, you're okay. It's fine. Everything's going to be okay. Just try to get those answers.
That's good. And getting those answers through community. There's no shame in asking for help. And I think that's been the main theme of our episode today is releasing the shame. And
Yes.
it's okay, to say, I need support through this.
Mhm.
And I think also it is a scary process when you're starting to go back in your past and dig up stuff that might have been buried intentionally, unintentionally. You might have been told, leave that door closed. We don't deal with that. We don't address that. And so when you have someone who's with you, who's a trained professional who can help you walk through that process, it will give you the courage you need and the support you need to make it through that. So I love what you
Absolutely.
shared there.
Also, just because you said the word shame, and I wanted to just go over just a little bit, a little more, don't be shameful for having shame either,
Mhm.
because shame is a part of the process. Okay. So I think that a lot of the stigma of shame is the fact that people are paralyzed by it. There's nothing wrong with feeling shame. Shame is a normal feeling, right? It's either because you're comparing yourself with other people. A lot of what of these emotions, there's a pattern in how we feel and how we behave. It's very much in alignment with a lot of people that are in similar situations. So shame really isn't that much of a big deal. Everybody has a little bit of it. So don't feel shame for feeling shameful. Just don't let the shame control you and stop you from finding the answers that you need. And actually, a part of even opening that conversation, starting that conversation, says, I'm shameful about my adoption. That's a conversation in itself. And it's something that can help someone unveil some of the layers of the pain or the abandonment or the feelings of neglect. Have that conversation, be upfront. Part of changing the narrative involves telling the truth. It's not about saying, well, I don't have shame about that, or I'm okay. No, if you're not okay, say it. But you can say it in such a way that says, I may be shameful about this, but I'm looking forward to not having shame. I'm looking forward to understanding what happened. Maybe the person who couldn't keep me had a story too. Maybe she was shameful about something that she couldn't provide for me. Try to connect the dots in a way that, in a human way, right? In a way that doesn't separate you from the rest of the crowd who's suffering. All of us are going through something or have had something one time or another. We're human. You're human. We're a part of it, not apart from it. Try to be in that group. Be a part of a group. Find a group. Be a part of community.
That's great, Dea. And I appreciate how you tell people to look at your emotions without judgment. I think there's certain emotions that we judge, anger, shame, feeling all these different things that we might go through in life, and that's just again being human. And so releasing yourself of those narratives and just saying, okay, this is how I feel, but I'm not going to always feel like this. But these feelings are prompts for me to explore. They're signals that something's there. So let me look into this, let me explore this, but say it's okay to feel that way. And
I think you hit the nail on the head with that one, because really, think about it. Even that you have a little bit of shame about something, it keeps coming back. It'll keep coming back. It'll keep circling back to that. So that's your sign that you need to work on something. You need to go in and dig deeper. You need to take another look. Take another look. Don't be afraid of looking at it. You don't have to shame people. You don't have to go back and pull it apart to create chaos. No, it's really about take another look. It's just between you and God, you and your counselor, you and your support system, or even you and yourself. Write a journal. Start writing something about how you feel every day. Write one thing every day, maybe about, if I could say a little exercise that's actually is helpful is every day, write one sentence about how you're feeling about the shame that you carry. What are you shameful about? It could be that I don't have a birth certificate that's legitimate. I'm adopted, or I have some kind of paper that defines who I am, or I don't know where I belong. I don't look like anybody. For many years, I didn't have photos of me when I was a baby. So when my kids were born, I thought they don't look like me because I didn't know what I looked like. So I was sad about it. And then when they got older, I'm a two-generational family. I have older kids from a previous marriage and three younger children from the second marriage. And I started seeing that my kids have similarities. So I said, oh, that must be from me. So I got the answers later in life, but eventually you will be able to connect the dots.
that's good. And Dea, I'm curious, going back to what you were saying in terms of identifying the shame that you might be experienced over a birth certificate or whatever, how do you also address the shame through faith, through the word of God? Was that something that was a source of your healing as it relates to certain things?
Yes. To some extent, I believe that even though I grew up with the notion that I had been chosen, right? This was a brilliant way to tell me that I wasn't like everybody else who came from someone's belly. But along the way, obviously, as I got older, it would pop in my mind that I might have not had this, or maybe I was abandoned. I didn't grow up with so much shame around the subject, but there are times when I felt impacted by it. And I give you one time in particular when I was having my first baby. And my mom was there with me, but she didn't know what to do. She didn't know how to tell me what I was feeling. She couldn't tell me what was going on. And I didn't know what was going on when I was in labor. And I felt that moment was the moment that if I could say I had one sadness about not being her biological, I wanted to be her biological daughter. I want her to be my biological mom. So in that moment with my first baby, she could be there for me to tell me what I needed to know. And she couldn't. And she cried. And I cried because we couldn't share that moment. But I remember knowing instinctively that that woman was put in my life because God had better for me. Understanding that even though I wasn't deep in my faith at that time, even looking back, I can see that there was a sense of an intuition, if you will, something that told me, she is my mom. That's the mom I'm supposed to have. Remembering that God puts things in our lives, situations, people, circumstances, events, even brings up these bad things, bad feelings in our life so we could take another look. I found that through my journey of faith, as I got closer to God, I mean, I understood even back to when I was born that, God wanted me to know that I wasn't to change the fate of my daughter's life. He brought my adoption from the point of reference was I was dying and this woman had a hysterectomy and she wanted to be a mom. She saved my life through unconditional love. She didn't even want a perfect baby. She took us. We were all full of scabs and bugs on us. We were almost dying, but she still took us and turned us from an ugly duckling to a swan, with her love. And so when I looked back, I said, even as I was a woman of faith going through the pregnancy with my daughter, my fourth pregnancy, God still said, look back. Go back and look at your life. Go back and look at the trajectory. Go back and look to where you came from and understanding that my faith in him had that power to show me where he wanted me to find the strength to save my daughter's life, to keep my daughter and not have an abortion like the geneticists were advising me to do because we didn't know she was going to be normal or not. In the end, there's nothing wrong with her. God forbid I had not taken her. I would have never known, obviously. But the point of the matter is that my faith, even though it happened years later, God still made me go back. He made me go back to that moment to show me the power of love. And then, of course, to me, it was much like being here today, by the way, that whole story with my daughter, this story in the book, the story on the magazine, the story that I gave in an interview when my daughter was 10 years old. I was a victory story, right? My victory story with this particular time of my life showed me that God is powerful in his timing. And honestly, even when I wanted to tell the story about what happened to me years prior, it never came out the right way because I was angry. I didn't know how, and I was angry at God too. But later on, when my daughter was 10, I got to tell the story in this interview in a show called Victory Road with Lee Benton, evangelist Lee Benton. And I said to her, what I want people to know is that God's timing is impeccable. It wasn't about my pain anymore. It wasn't about what I had suffered to find that out. But even through this struggle back when I didn't know God, it somehow was the catalyst for my journey of faith. I started looking for him. I was angry at him at first, and then I went back to him. And so I think this is how my faith is sort of interwoven with the storm. You know, I write songs, I write Christian songs. One of them is that you're my peace in the storm. That's where I find peace in my storm. And so that's how I think my faith is interwoven with the pain, interwoven with the struggle, because I know that his timing is impeccable. I know that I may not have certain answers. You that are listening, you may not have the answers. You may never find all the answers, but he knows everything. God knows everything. He knows everything about you. He knows everything about before, during, and after. He knows about your future. You don't, but he does. So to rely on God, rely on him, even when you don't know all the answers, it's okay because he does.
Amen, Dea. Thank you so much for being a guest on our show today. You have truly blessed us, and I encourage everyone to check out Dea's website. Make sure you pick up a copy of her book. I'll have that information on how you can get that in the show notes. And Dea, continue just to be you, doing amazing things for the kingdom, allowing God to use you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here today, particularly because I feel, again, adoption is a gift, and having this opportunity to I think this is a tribute to my mom, to my dad, to my family. Um, whenever I have the opportunity to talk about my past, I always feel, I don't know, I feel again, this is the gift. This was the gift. The adoption is the gift.
It is. It is, Dea, and you are a gift. You are a gift to us. And
Thank
so
you.
God bless you. Thank you again for being on the show, coming back to bless us again.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and thank you all for tuning in to today's episode. I encourage you to share this with a friend. Many of us know individuals who have been adopted and might be struggling with shame. This episode is especially for them. So be sure to share, leave a 5-star review, and if you haven't already, subscribe. You can find us not only on YouTube, but on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the different podcast channels out there. So continue to stay tuned week after week as we do our best to encourage you on your healing journey. And remember, for more healing resources, visit us online at faithonthejourney.org. Again, that is faithonthejourney.org. So that's it for this week, family. Until next time, you stay blessed and keep your faith on the journey. I'll see you soon.